Colonizing Mars, the Red Planet's Red Tape. A colony on Mars, a new home for humanity, a failsafe to protect us from extinction, and the pinnacle of the adventurous nature of the human spirit. But unfortunately, right now, it's also just a pipe dream. While not impossible, the dream of a colony on Mars is unlikely to become a reality because it would be a costly, difficult, and dangerous endeavor due to scientific, logistical, and financial constraints. As members of society, we need to be informed about the reality of such grandiose goals before we make decisions about whether or not those goals would be the best use of our limited funding and resources. Although I'm not quite yet an astrophysicist, in the words of Jeff Rosenstock, one of my favorite musicians, my trajectory is crystal clear. I can see it in the stars. I'm pursuing a degree in astrophysics, and my lifelong fascination with stars and space has drawn me to keep up with the latest news and discoveries in the field of space exploration. First, let's talk about the physical and scientific limitations of the planet itself, which present barriers to the colonization of Mars. According to ASU's Mars Education Program, the atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide, and it's incredibly thin. The Times article, The Times View on Navigating Red Planet Challenges, explains that the average temperature on the surface of Mars is negative 60 degrees Celsius, which is far below freezing temperatures. ASU's Mars Education Program also explains how Mars doesn't have an ozone layer, which means that there is no protection from harmful UV radiation. An article from The New Yorker titled Can the Human Body Endure a Voyage to Mars also talks about how Mars lacks a magnetosphere, and that is crucial for protecting not only the planet but those who inhabit the planet from solar winds and cosmic radiation. In the same way that there are physical and scientific barriers, there are also logistical and financial barriers. In the Times article, Why Elon Musk's Plan to Put 1 Million People on Mars is Doomed to Fail, biologist Dr. Kelly Weinersmith explains that it would cost trillions of dollars to establish a colony, and there's no economic incentive to spend this kind of money because there isn't any profit to be made from a colony on Mars. Dr. Weinersmith also explains how there's a strong possibility that the difference in gravity could negatively impact reproductive capabilities, which is something that would be necessary to establish a true colony on Mars. Additionally, the same article from The New Yorker explains that there are many significant health risks to prolonged space travel, such as muscle loss, issues with bone density, and deteriorating mental health. Both of these articles, published by The Times, explain how a profound lack of resources on Mars is another huge barrier for establishing a truly self-sufficient colony. From the thin, oxygen-scarce atmosphere, to the lack of water, to the toxic soil, which would make subsistence farming incredibly difficult, a colony on Mars would depend on regular shipments of supplies from Earth for a very long time, if it would ever even be possible to operate fully independently from such shipments at all. Despite Musk's outlandish goal of establishing a 1 million-person colony on Mars by mid-century, the reality is that it will take centuries just to establish an adequate base, if we can even overcome these daunting scientific and technological hurdles. Dr. Kelly Weinerstein explains that a colony on Mars wouldn't even prevent humanity from going extinct in the event of a world-ending catastrophe. It would only delay extinction for a bit. Billionaires with grandiose goals of establishing a self-sufficient colony on Mars are unsurprisingly out of touch with the general scientific consensus. That consensus is that it would take centuries of unprecedented technological advancements before we could realistically establish a colony on Mars. However, there are much more realistic and practical alternatives to a Mars colony that will still lay the foundation for a future of space exploration and colonization. This article, Repairing the Earth is Both Urgent and Possible, published in Le Monde, talks about how there are still a lot of ways that we can reverse the climate change that is slowly making our current planet uninhabitable. A study titled Feasibility for the Commercial Space Station in Low Earth Orbit, published by Science Direct, explains how a self-sustaining commercial space station could not only be cheaper than the ISS, but could also eventually turn a profit over the next few decades. Finally, based on this BBC article titled The Epic Quest to Build a Permanent Moon Base, it's evident that a moon base would not only be much more feasible, but also would provide more value to humanity and the goals of space exploration in the future. As we look to the future, we must remember that the captivating dream of colonizing Mars comes with a perilous and costly price tag. What I hope that you take away from this is the unrealistic expectations of establishing a colony on Mars, especially by the mid-century. Establishing a colony on Mars would require unprecedented technological advancements and cost upwards of $1 trillion. Even if these conditions could be met, it would still be a perilous and daunting task for future colonists. The atmosphere, lack of magnetosphere, and the gravity of Mars present arduous barriers and health risks. Our funds would be better spent fixing our current planet and advancing space exploration through space stations or moon bases. A Russian rocket pioneer by the name of Konstantin Tsiolkovsky once said, "The Earth is a cradle of humanity, but we cannot live in the cradle forever." In order to set up future generations for success in space colonization, we must be realistic about what is currently feasible and most beneficial to the continuation of our species. Only then can we truly leave the cradle and explore the infinite cosmos around us.